The best way to get better at programming is to practice programming. So here's a simple example of us working with some variables. This sample file is available for download, listed in the description. I'll give you a few seconds so you can work on this on your own. Feel free to pause the video if you need to, work on it, and then check your answers. Alright, so let's see how we're going to do this. Our first to do is to print out a string variable. So I'm going to create a variable called name and say name equals John Smith. Assigning a value is very easy. You give it a variable name. Variable names must start with a letter, but they can include underscores and numbers. Then you use the equals to assign whatever's on the right-hand side to what's on the left. Just like with string literals, we can create a string with double quotes, single quotes, or the 3 double quotes. To print out a variable that's a string, all we say is print, and then our variable name. We can print this out, and you see the answer there. Now, to create a variable that's going to store a numeric value and print it out is very similar. I'm going to create a variable called num1, and it's going to equal 6. To create a second numeric variable, I'm just going to say num2. Now, while I've created variables that have the name num inside of it, that does not mean that they actually store numbers. It's what we put after the equal sign. Python does not require us to define a data type to put in a variable. Calling my variables num1 and num2 makes it easier for me to look at and instantly know what type of data is inside of them. Hopefully, I give my variable names something meaningful. As this is just an example, num1 and num2 provide good meaning because these are variables that are storing sample numbers. I'm going to put another number in, this time a 5. I can put in large numbers and small numbers, including negative numbers if I want to. To print these out, I'll say print, and then give the variable I want to print out. If I want to add these two values together, such as in my to-do number 3, I simply have to say print num1 plus num2. Because Python knows that we put numbers inside of them, it will add those two values together. And if I run this, you'll see that my third print statement, it prints out the value of 11. That's because it did the simple math for me. And I could have put other mathematical operations in there, such as minus, multiplication, etc. Now, you might think, well, what happens if I have numbers, but they're enclosed within a string? So let's take a look at that real quick. I'm going to put str for string num1, and I'm going to specify 6, just like I did before. str underscore num2 equals, and I'm going to use a single quotes for 5 just to show it works exactly the same. Now, you'll notice that these are very similar to num1 and num2, except that they are now strings. They're strings because we have them in quotes. My variable name helps me define the fact that these are strings, and you'll see how I use what's known as snake case. That is, I use an underscore to separate between my words. Now, I don't have to write out my whole words like string and number if I'm using an abbreviation that is commonly used. And in programming, str is a common abbreviation for a string. Now, what happens if I try to add these, just like I did with my print num1 plus num2? I'll say print str num1 plus str num2. And when I do this, you notice that it prints my very last one is 65. That's because as strings, when we use the plus symbol, we do something called concatenate. That is to add those two together or put them side by side. So instead of adding numerically, we're adding in strings, adding one string onto the end of the next. That's concatenation. So how would I go about converting those strings into numbers so that I can work with them numerically? Well, it depends upon what type of number I have. If I'm dealing with a number without a decimal place, it's referred to as an integer, and so I'm going to use int, int, and then pass string 1 into that int function. I'll need to do this also for string num2. If I don't do this for the second one, it'll give me a type mismatch error. So now I'm going to take those two strings, convert them into numbers, and get ready to print them out. Hit run. You notice I see my variable name for John Smith, my numeric 6, 11, and then it now shows 11, which is what I want. So that's how we convert strings into numbers. Stick with us to get more experience in programming with Python.